Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to kind of an edition of the news I'll just call the Russian news, because that seems to be a story that's dominating everybody's brain power at the moment. um, the reason why I think personally that's a bit baffling, I'll come to in a bit. But I hope you're all doing well. I hope everybody's got through their weekend nicely. The weather here in Bournemouth is rather acceptable. Has been for a couple of days now, 2 or 3 days. Long may that continue. Just looking out there because that's where my window is. I'd like to tell you a little story. And this, what I have in my hand, is kind of backing that story up. You'll see at the bottom there something looking like a rather large stamp, postage stamp. Well, that's a visa that you have to pay for in Turkey if you're on transit through the country. And basically, that page there tells a story in itself. Back in 2008, I visited the Republic of Georgia with my wife at the time, who comes from that area. And on the Friday evening of August the 7th or 8th, I think it was, can't remember now off the top of my head, but it was certainly the evening of the Olympic opening ceremony in Beijing, funny enough, with Putin sat there clapping the Russian team as they marched into the stadium, and all cameras then focusing on the Georgian dignitaries who were in the same stadium. Nobody find that odd that leaders of the same countries are sharing the same stadium while their people on the ground are having a punch up? Don't know. But anyway, we were settling down one evening, drinking red wine, eating lots of Georgian food, watching this on the TV. And when suddenly the house that we were staying in started shuddering and we were hearing explosions. We were in a town called Porti, which is allegedly an old Greek merchant town on the Black Sea coast. It's supposed to be on the routes of Jason and the Argonauts and all that sort of stuff, the Golden Fleece. Anyway, so what essentially happened was we were being bombed by the Russians. And in this town in Porti, because the ground is so moist and damp, they tend to build the houses on stilts. So the ground level serves as your basement, as it were. They don't go into the ground. And you know, sort of the ground level for them is your first floor, and the actual ground level is the basement. That's what I mean. So as this was going on down, the electricity cut out and everything else. People were starting to scream and get very noisy and very emotional and everything else. And everybody proceeded to go out of the house. Now you can imagine the chaos. It was nighttime. It was dark. I don't speak a word of Georgian. I can just about say cheers and thank you. And because they have a separate language, it's nothing to do with Russian. They have their own alphabet. It's not Cyrillic. I'll get to Cyrillic in a minute. But anyway, we all left the house and went out in the streets, and there were people grabbing their personal AK-47s that they had from the Civil War a few years previously and all that sort of stuff. Everybody had one at home. And there was lots of gunfire, people shooting in the air and all that sort of stuff, right? But of course, my main concern was, how on earth do we get out of this? Because if we're going to have a night of this, it's going to be a nightmare. So I started trying to call, once the phone lines were working on and off, working 1 minute, then not working the next minute. And I was trying to, while all this is going on, get in touch with the embassies as well. But to no avail, of course. That continued into the Saturday morning. But anyway, that night, it started easing off. We were out in the streets, like I said. The lights and electricity came back on and everything. We went back into the house, and I proceeded with my wife's cousin at the time to drink lots and lots of red wine and not get drunk, strangely enough. So we didn't get a night's sleep. We were all very, very much on edge, and they were constantly talking with the neighbours and everything else, and I wasn't understanding a word that was being said. This went into the next morning. The next morning, I continued my attempts to get hold of the embassy. The British embassy wouldn't look after us all because my wife at the time isn't a Brit. I am. And her cousin who travelled with us had a German passport, so the Brits weren't going to help her. And the same went for each individual embassies. They wouldn't help me or they wouldn't help the other one because none of us were nationals of that country. So it was getting all that sort of pathetic paperwork stuff that, or red tape stuff that is of no use to any person on earth. And while that was all happening on the Saturday, the local villagers were all chipping together to try and get enough petrol together to get us three out of the town to the nearest exit point to get to the Turkish border, because we knew before we went to Georgia that if anything kicked off, we'd have to go south to Turkey, because Turkey, of course, is a member of NATO. Made sense. And so that's what we did. They managed to get the petrol together, and we then left with wheels screeching almost on that Saturday lunchtime. Well, yeah, it was about 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and we headed south, basically towards the Turkish border. Now, the whole trip to get us out of Georgia and get us through Turkey via Turkey, eventually we flew from Ankara, so we had to travel 2/3 of the way through Turkey in coaches and stuff. But it took us about 3 to 3.5 days to eventually get back to Berlin in Germany with money, 3 adults with about 5 languages at our disposal. I speak 2. They speak 2 each, or I think my ex-wife, she speaks 3, including Russian, because they have to learn Russian in school as well in Georgia back in the day. So that begs other questions, doesn't it, about how on earth do refugees make it from Damascus? How do they do that? No languages, no money, no idea of Europe as a whole. Very difficult continent to get around if you've got no cash, that's for sure. That we could do a show on that, or a program, or whatever you want to call it, on that another time, a stream, because that in itself just backs up the nonsense, that we've been flooded by immigrants. But anyway, that's another story. But the reason why I'm talking about the Georgia thing is because this sort of event, or kind of happening, has been happening down that region time and time and time again. Now, we know that, for example, Putin's official background, his CV, is that he's of a KGB background, and he spent a lot of his time in a city called Dresden in Germany, and all that sort of stuff. Hence, he speaks various languages fluently and all that, blah, blah, blah. But we since then had the 2014 thing with Ukraine, and now we've had this again with Ukraine very recently. And they all come at certain points. For example, the other one came just on the back of a massive financial crash, for example. So there's always seems to be a storyline that needs filling somewhere, where he clearly has assumed the role of the bad guy. That's the role he's been given. People might think I'm a bit of a lunatic saying that, but it's the way it is. They're handled, all of them. There's photographic evidence of them having their meetups in their Masonic gear, for goodness sakes. Does it have consequences for people on ground level? Could I have got killed in Georgia when we were trying to get out that night if we would have taken a direct hit? Yeah, sure. And you're going to have collateral. Yeah, but since when does that matter to the powers that shouldn't be? It's the point I'm making with that. They don't care about civilian casualties or anything like that. Anybody who thinks they even care one bit is very much mistaken. We shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that they think like we do. We don't. They're handled. They've got jobs to fulfill. They've got orders to carry out. All of them. Whether it's the female Yoda that is Merkel, or, Boris Johnson and all the other clowns. Let's have it right. You wouldn't have these people running your corner shop, never mind a country. That alone is a giveaway, really, isn't it? But so anyway, getting back to that. So that is the passport that I kept from that occasion. So you have the visa there, and then you have your various stamps to get in and out of the country and all that sort of stuff. And that's why I kept it, just as a bit of a reminder for myself that these things get rolled out all the time. They'll create problems in certain border regions, just like they did in Georgia with an area called Abkhazia, I think it's called, which is a little section of land between Georgia and Russia in the North Caucasian mountain range, right? They do it all the time. And it's not going to lead to a third world war, and it ain't going to lead to London getting nuked or anything of the sort. And I grew up with all these scaremongering stories when my dad was in the British Army, when we had the old West versus East stuff going down, the phony Cold War back in the 70s and 80s. We grew up with that. It's a narrative that gets pushed time and time and time again. And it's always the same countries that play the bad guy. They do it in military maneuvers as well. The Brits often played the Russians, the Americans played the good guys. My dad told me all about it when he used to do tank exercises throughout the woodlands of Germany. You know, they do it all the time. Only sometimes people get hurt, sometimes people don't. But like I said, for the ones at the top, it matters not. It's all part of a bigger picture. But I just wanted to get that out there because, to be honest with you, it's not worth believing at all. And don't forget, by the way, Vladimir Putin very quickly went along with everybody else when it came down to all the COVID nonsense, didn't he? So if he was that much of a rebel, he'd be standing firm against us on that as well, wouldn't he? He doesn't. Because they were all told what to do. Every country followed suit, I should say. So, there's many giveaways we have to remind ourselves that it's nonsense. Are there people perhaps getting hurt on the ground? Perhaps. Are there Russians in the streets in Kiev? Not really. I saw an interview yesterday with a guy who stood in the middle market square and he's filming all the lovely old world buildings in the background, saying he couldn't even hear gunshots. So who do you believe? Well, I would say none of them. And why would I believe a media that's been lying to us anyway for the last 2 years, as we very well know? They've been complicit in all of the stuff that's been going down as well. So we have to keep reminding ourselves of that and not just cherry pick. I'm talking to myself more than anything else, really. Not just cherry pick the news headlines that suit or don't suit or should get aggrieved over and shouldn't get aggrieved over. I need to remind myself to remain consistent and firm on that one. So I'm not buying any of it, I'm afraid to say. Some of you may agree, some of you may not. I'm basing it on my personal experience. I know for a fact that what the media represent is not what goes on ground level, because when we got back to Germany, just getting back to the whole fleeing Georgia thing, we ended up having visitors from the German TV station, so ZDF, came round and did a couple of interviews with myself and my wife at the time. And when I watched their footage back on their show, that when they were putting it out on the TV, they weren't reporting at all on what was going on over there. In fact, they kind of cut out most of what we said and put their own spin and interpretation on it. So I know from first-hand experience that the media lie. We've had it here in demos in Bournemouth where we've been misquoted after being interviewed by the Bournemouth Echo, for example. Happens all the time. That is all meant for the benefit of the consumer. Sells papers. But anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because that is quite important, I think. And it also puts another spin on the whole immigration thing anyway, which is something I complain about for a long time. That there's no way on earth you would just pop in a taxi and pop over to the coast of England from Damascus. Doesn't work like that. Just doesn't work like that. That's not reality. But anyway, there you go. Bit of food for thought for myself more than anything else. So I just thought I wanted to put that out there. And that is it, really. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I shall be meeting friends in about 45 minutes. Now I'm looking that way because there's a clock on my wall. And then we're going to go for a little Spaziergang. Anybody who knows what that means, please drop it in the comments below. Until then, I will see you all soon. Some of you sooner. And Emily, if you're watching this, we'll speak later on. All right. Take care for now. And, by the way, he's happy as Larry now as well, because I've opened a little slit on the side. He's getting some decent sunlight. Vitamin D, you see. I don't like it when he goes anemic. All right. So on that note, I bid you all farewell. Speak to you soon. Ta-ta for now.